where it flows that we don't get erosion. Sorghum is very good for that. Beautiful sorghum flower. And like the broomcorn, it's not a syrup sorghum. So let's say you're not sure your sorghum's ready. There are a few things that I can look at to help me decide it's right. Here they are. Good afternoon and welcome to Willow's Green Permaculture. Today, I'd like to talk to you about bread and cereal and cake and cookies and all that other great stuff. You know, I love to grow our fruit and vegetables in all its variety of colors and flavors and sweetness and spiciness, and then to add to that potatoes and corn that helps fill us up, and they're so delicious, and then all the herbs and so on, and then of course the beans and the peas, which give our protein. But if you can add to that your ingredients for your bread, your cakes, your cookies, your cereal, then you've really got it made. And one very important part of that is sorghum. And so today I'm going to be talking to you about sorghum and all the different varieties of sorghum that we grow and how we use it, how we thresh it, and what we do with it to be able to put it into our bread and all the rest of it, and all the different ways we grow it. So if you're interested in that, then let's get started. This afternoon I'd like to talk to you about the sorghum that we grew in the curve garden. I made a video about this in the spring where you saw me planting this directly into thick grass, and the reason why I did that is because the grass was there to hold the soil in place all year long, because it is where we have one of our drainage canals that goes through the property. We have to make sure that the water can flow, and we also have to make sure that where it flows that we don't get erosion. And so sorghum is very good for that. And also, of course, all types of native grasses are good for that. And so because the sorghum is an annual, here anyway, it's an annual in zone 5B, so we have to make sure that there's something in place all year long. And that's so we have basically native perennials and grasses and so on. And because I don't want to kill them in the spring, I don't cover them in compost, I don't cover them in like any kind of thick layer to kill them. And I plant the sorghum directly in there because, as you can see, the sorghum was able to grow. The tillers aren't as thick as some of the ones that are in our pumpkin patch, where basically I was able to clear, and also in our turtle garden, but it grew very well. And so I'm going to show you how it did. Now I'm actually harvesting it a little bit earlier than the others, even though the others I've already harvested, but they were much further along because the conditions were different. So let me have a show. I can show you how these guys are doing. So now I'm leaving the tillers in place because we still have some warm weather left, it would seem, so we might get a second harvest with these guys. We'll see. And so, as you can see, these tillers aren't as big as some of the ones that I got in the pumpkin patch and in the turtle garden out back. But in those places, I didn't have grass. I didn't plant it inside of grass. And so these had a lot of competition, but they still managed to grow, which is really nice. It was my experiment for this year, and I'm happy because we eat a lot of sorghum through the year, and so we're getting a ton of it. We still have lots left actually from 2023, but this is really great because this is just, for me, it's an experiment to be able to show people how there are grains that you can grow in such abundance, and they can feed you and give you protein and give you energy, and you can make your bread and your cake and your pancakes and your flatbread and so much other with it. And so it's really nice. Now the thing about sorghum is you can tell that it's starting to get ripe when the stems are starting to get a little bit with red patches, and also obviously the seeds are making the color that they need to be. Here are 3 ways that you can tell that your sorghum is ready to harvest. First, the color of the seeds. The seeds, when they're ripe, should be a certain color. Sometimes it's red, sometimes it's brown, sometimes it's white, but they shouldn't be green. These ones are pretty well mostly the color they're supposed to be. A few of the seeds are green. So I might think, maybe this isn't ripe. So here are a couple other ways you can tell that your sorghum is ripe. While the sorghum is growing, the stem is always green. But when it begins to ripen, when it's ripe, then the stem turns red. And that's another way of telling that your sorghum's ripe. And here's a third way. Now, sorghum can often have several tillers, several stems coming off of one. But when you have a new stem like this, look at this new stem starting to grow late in the season, when your sorghum's getting ripe, well, then you know that this other sorghum is ready because the stem is putting out a new one. I'll show you the ones that we harvested from the pumpkin patch that we've already sort of dried, and now they're just hanging stored in our workshop. And I'll also show you a couple other kinds, because this is syrup sorghum, but we also grow coral sorghum, which is another type of syrup sorghum, but the seeds are much bigger and they're a beautiful burgundy red. We also grow broomcorn, and this year we started growing some popping sorghum. All that stuff is hanging in the workshop right now. I love it. What I love about it is so easy to harvest. And I'm going to also show you right here, there's a new tiller starting to grow here. And so even though this one's a little bit green, I'll be able to, because we're not harvesting these for seed next year, I'm going to use the ones from the pumpkin patch for seed next year. So it's okay if these are a little green. They can dry up and be used as flour just fine. So now we've got this new tiller growing here. We might get a second harvest. We'll see. Depends on the timing of the frost. But over in the pumpkin patch, I'll show you, and also in the turtle garden, we've gotten some second harvests with the sorghum. New tillers. It started to grow after we harvested. Also, the other advantage to this late harvest that we're getting with these ones is it's October 5th today, and so the birds most of the summer birds, the songbirds that stay through the summer, they've left. We still have lots of birds here, but not the huge numbers that we have in the summertime, and so there's not as much bird foraging, which is good. We got a lot of bird foraging in our other harvest of sorghum, but we got a ton of it anyway. And I like having the birds because they help us with our gardening, because they don't only eat our sorghum, they eat the bugs in the garden. That's where they get most of their protein. And so I'm happy about that, and we still get tons. We use the sorghum, like I said, to make our cakes, our bread, cookies, pancakes. Now, this is what I do when I'm harvesting. Let me back up a little. We've cut these off, and now I'm just going to pull these leaves all off. And I like to do it when it's all bunched together. Just pull all these leaves off so that it dries more quickly. And the thing is, I'm going to harvest the canes later for sugar cane. I'm not going to harvest them right now. However, if you haven't seen any of my previous videos on sorghum, I can show you that. See, and I've pulled all these leaves off, and the stems are damp. They're full of juice, and so now they'll be able to dry more quickly. And this amount of sorghum here will be enough for probably a couple loaves of bread. But we get, like I said, we get enough to, we make a couple loaves of bread every week, maybe 2 or 3 loaves of bread, probably more. We still have sorghum left from last year, and fully half of our flour comes from this. So I've cut a piece of one of the stems of sorghum so I can show you what you do to get the syrup. Now, this doesn't look like the sugar cane that you'd buy at the grocery store. It's a lot thinner. And actually, like I said, these plants are very thin because I planted them in the middle of all sorts of grass. However, the thin ones often have sweeter juice. The really thick ones might be drier sometimes. And what you do is you cut off the nodes right here and right there. Cut them off. And then if you've got a knife, you can peel it. I don't have a knife on me, so I'm just going to peel it with my teeth. I try not to bite too deeply into the stem because I want to leave as much of the juicy part as possible. Now this is a bit like you might see people chewing on grass sometimes, grass stems, because they're a bit juicy. Well, sugarcane is a type of grass. Sorghum is a type of grass. However, it's a lot sweeter than the stuff you see people chewing on. Just the regular grass. So I've got it all peeled now. Now, you can take this, and if you've got a press, you can press it to get the juice out. Then you can boil the juice down and make molasses out of it. But it's really good just like this. Now, it's grass, so you're not going to swallow it. You just chew it to get a nice sweet juice out of it. It's so good. And then when you've had enough, you spit it out. So I'm going to show you some of the sorghum that's growing new tillers. I'm going to show you a couple of our last coral sorghums that are growing. Most of it's all harvested. And I'll show you one of our really big sorghums that I'm hoping that it hasn't bloomed yet, it hasn't flowered yet. I'm hoping it does because it's the biggest one and I'd like to collect seeds from. Here is where I got some self-seeded beans. The only time in my life I've had these, there are a ton of them. I've already collected a bunch of the seeds because they were growing on this sorghum last year and some of it stayed all winter and I guess didn't fall until after the last frost of spring, and it sprouted and grew, which is very, very impressive. I've collected a whole bunch of that seed and I'm going to experiment with. Very nice. I love sorghum. Anything that's really easy to grow, I just love. Well, everything's easy to grow, really. Nature helps us. I'm going to let everything else continue to grow for about another week. So here's what I got from this area. It's quite a bit, but there's still most of it's here. This is just, I'd say, more than a tenth of what's here. So there's still a ton left. I'm just going to let it continue to grow, and I'm going to see if some of the ones that I harvested, if new tillers grow on the canes that I've harvested. After, let's say, a first frost or something like that, that's when I'll come out and maybe harvest most of the canes. What we've been doing with the canes, if we've felt like having some sugar cane for dessert or for a snack in the evening, I'll just come out and harvest a couple stems, you know, because one stem will give us 4 or 5 of those lengths of sugar cane to chew on, which is nice. So let's have a look and see at the other sugar cane plantings that we have. So here's the coral sorghum. As you can see, it's got a much tighter head to it. Beautiful red berries. I'm going to grow more of it next year. In fact, I think these are going to be my seeds from this one, because here where it's growing, the conditions are not very good, and it gave a wonderful bloom of sorghum here. And so I'm going to use these seeds in elsewhere where we've got better conditions. So as you can see here, here's the other type of sorghum. You can kind of see the difference in the berries. They're mostly just a different color, but there's a lot more chaff in the syrup sorghum, but that's fine. When we thresh it, the chaff comes off and so on. And if there's some left over on there, well, it's just extra fiber in our bread and our cakes. Here's another coral sorghum that's still green. As you can see, it's really, really tight when it's green. I'm just going to let these dry a little bit in here, but I'm not going to let them stay here for long. I'm not going to let them stay past sunset, because at sunset the dew starts to drop, and so they'll just get wet again. I'll bring them inside. There's our moon garden. It's our moon garden because it's the garden that gets the least sun. It gets barely 5 or maybe 6 hours a day, and this time of year even less. And so I'm really impressed that we got some sorghum. Now, if we look at this sorghum, it's our latest ripening sorghum. We even still have some that are getting some new tillers on them late in the season, which is kind of nice. So this is what I was talking about. There's the ripe sorghum right there, and because it's ripe, it's got a new tiller growing right there. So that's gonna give another flower and maybe more sorghum if it's got time. But here's something I wanted to show you back here. There's one, there it is, right up there, 4 meters tall. So at least maybe 13, 14 feet tall. Let's see how many nodes this has. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Wow. And then the bloom, and it's about to start blooming. 10 sugarcane sections. A really thick stem. This is more like the ones that grew last year. But I'm thinking that maybe the reason why they're smaller this year is because we didn't isolate them. So they intermixed with the coral sorghum, the broomcorn, and those are both, well, smaller stemmed anyway. Although broomcorn can be pretty tall. So here I'm standing beside some of our sorghum that's surrounding our pumpkin patch. The conditions are really wet here, which is really nice for the sorghum, although they do tolerate dry conditions. And as you can see, it's all harvested. However, if you look carefully, you can see that the ends of the stems all have new tillers growing on them. That fresh new leaves growing. And let me see if I can show you some. Here's one right here. You see I harvested this one right here. Here's where I cut it. Here's where I cut it right there to harvest it. And then it grew this new tiller here and a new flower. And look at that. Seeds are already forming. So we might just get another harvest here. Here's another one. You see? So I harvested it right there. That's where I cut it. And this here is a new leaf that's growing, and here we got a new tiller growing, a new flower growing. So it's nice. Obviously, if we were further down south, they'd have plenty of time to grow more. But here it's a little cooler, so we'll see. But anyways, they've all got them. Right over there we got some more, so surrounding the pumpkin patch. The broomcorn that we've harvested is all resprouting, growing more tillers. Look at all these are all new leaves growing, because this was all harvested. So there we go. Harvest of sorghum, and a second harvest of sorghum. So what we have here is this is some Williams sorghum. This is a type of syrup sorghum. And here we have coral sorghum. It's also a type of syrup sorghum. And then here's some popping sorghum. And then here is some broomcorn sorghum. Getting a couple of colors. We got some black and some burgundy. Sometimes when it grows, it turns yellow. Sometimes it turns orange too. Really beautiful. So it's very simple how we thresh this. Let's start with the broomcorn. What we do is we'll just take a branch. Basically, we'll separate out the branches a little here. And then we just pull it off the stems. It comes off really easily. And you don't have to squeeze too tight, because seeing as this is grass, you know, you don't want to get a grass cut when you're pulling this stuff off. So we just pull it off. And there we go. And then it comes out like that, all ready. There's nothing else to do with this. We jar it up. We make sure that this is completely dry. When it's completely dry, then we will put it in just a regular screw top jar. No seal, no, just a regular screw top. Sort of like well, this is a pasta jar. We just keep it in these pasta jars until we're ready to use it. So that's the broomcorn. All right. Now let's look at Williams syrup sorghum. The stems are shorter and kind of fatter, and so once again, but it's the same idea. But because they're shorter, we do it more like this. Sort of like you rub the stems all together, and the seeds fall out. They fall out of the chaff. The chaff stays connected for the most part to the branch, which is kind of nice. But if some of the chaff comes off, unless it's a big huge piece, we just leave it in there, and it's going to just be part of our flower eventually. All right, so let's do some more here. So this is Williams sorghum, Williams syrup sorghum. which is what we grow mostly. Although this number 2 is the Broomcorn sorghum, because that was the first type we grew. So here we go. That's what it looks like. And we put it into our jar, our pasta jars, and then it stays there until we need it. As you saw earlier in the video, we hang all of our sorghum to dry and we leave it there, and also we hang it also in our living room and dining room as a decoration. And the extra stuff, which is most of it, well, it's hanging in our workshop until we're ready to thresh it like this and stick it up in jars. So it could be hanging there a couple months. Next, the coral sorghum. This was the third type I tried. I've been growing this for 2 years. But the last 2 years it was just kind of experimental. I didn't grow that much. This year I grew a little bit more. And the next year, I'm going to eventually keep all these seeds. There must be several hundred of them. And I'm going to plant these for next year to get a lot of the coral sorghum, because it's really nice big seeds. And it's a little bit like the Williams sorghum, another type of syrup sorghum. And so we just rub these branches. Actually, look at how easily this one, the seeds just come off super easy. This seems to be the easiest one. I've never really had that much. I never grew that much. I only grew enough the last 2 years to keep the seeds, not to really use it. Yeah, that came off real fast. That was nice. That's pretty well all of them. See, they're all gone. The chaff is what's still on the branch. And then here we have the seeds. Nice size seed. Very meaty. Not much chaff left in there. Whatever chaff is left, well, it's just going to go into the flour. Now the last one, the popping sorghum. This year was the first time I grew it, so I wasn't sure when it was ripe, because it was different. It's the popping sorghum is like the broomcorn sorghum. It has a similar tassels to it, a bit like the broomcorn. And like the broomcorn, it's not a syrup sorghum. Here's a bit of a close-up of it. Actually, I'd say it's structured more like the Williams sorghum. It feels like the Williams sorghum as I'm threshing it like this. And it's coming off pretty fast. Actually, I'm going to do another one because I've mixed this one up all with the coral sorghum. And then I can show you the popping sorghum all by itself. Let's take another branch. Let's just thresh this. You can hear it falling into this bowl. That's why I chose this bowl, so you could hear it. Coming out pretty easily. It was very ripe. Yeah, like I said, I wasn't sure when it was ripe, and so you know how I knew when it was ripe? It's when the birds had already eaten like a third of it, or half of it. So here it is. That came out pretty easily. That's some popping sorghum. I actually didn't buy it to pop it, although I might try. That's good too. So there you go. There is all our different types of sorghum. That one's pretty fast too, that type. And then you can make brooms out of these branches. The broomcorn, when you're all done threshing it, then you can make broomsticks out of this stuff. Just one branch. Popping sorghum. There we got the whole mixture there. Get rid of some of that chaff. There we are. There we go. Now, what do we do with this grain? Well, we put it in a blender. Now, at first we just used a regular blender that we used to make our milkshakes and stuff like that with. and that was fine, but we wanted a finer blend, a finer flour. And so we use this one right here that I'm showing you. I think it's called Sumit. It's a blender that comes from India, because, you know, in India they're real experts at making flours and powders out of so many different things, out of herbs, out of seeds, out of nuts, out of grain, and so on. And so it works really well. It's a bit more expensive than your regular run-of-the-mill kitchen blender, but less expensive than some of like the real fancy blenders that you can get on the market. I'd say that it was well worth it. I think it was under $200, and we just got it at a local shop here. It was available here in our local town, and it works really, really well. It's warm, so very important that you let this cool if you're going to store it for any number of days. Let it cool while open, otherwise you're going to have moisture. So here it is. Beautiful sorghum flour, ready for some bread mixed with squash and with all-purpose flour, or for some cookies, pancakes, flatbread, or make some porridge out of this, you name it. Just wonderful. Mix it with all sorts of other stuff. So there you go, and then we make flour. We put that into the blender, and then we blend it right up until it gets to the fineness that we want. And then, for the most part, whether we're making bread or cake, then all we need to do is mix roughly half sorghum and half, let's say, regular flour that you can get at the grocery store. Any type of all-purpose flour. We still haven't perfected our wheat growing. Well, it's more we haven't perfected our wheat harvesting, but that's one of my goals for next year. For things like flatbread, pancakes, and cookies, you can actually use 100% sorghum, and it works. Something we'll often add to those recipes is amaranth or chia, or flax, to give it more consistency. And what we add to pretty well all of our bread, cake, cookie, and flatbread recipes, we also add squash, cooked squash or cooked pumpkin, because that also gives it a better consistency. It holds it better together, it gives it some moisture, and so on. And then, of course, for cereal, if you just want to cook it up as a cereal, you can cook it up like any type of cereal, like quinoa or all the rest, and make a porridge out of it and just eat it on its own like that. So those are the different ways of how we use our sorghum. Just keep it in this pasta jar until we need it. And then when we need it, we make the flour as we need it, not before, because this will keep a lot longer than flour. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Hope you found it useful. Hope you learned something from it. You know, if you found it useful and you enjoyed it and you learned something from it, then please share it with your friends. Hit that like button, make a comment, ask a question. I love to respond to your comments and to answer your questions. And these are ways you can support our channel. And another way you can support our channel, if you haven't done it yet, is subscribe. Support our channel just from subscribing. Thank you very much for watching. Have a great week, and we will see you next time.